takes 5 minutes to find great music. One of the places is Road Records.
They sell good records. They make nice cups of tea. They let you use the toilet sometimes if you're desperate.
Any independent Irish release of the last 10 years, there's always a thank you to Dave and Julie at Road, and I think that is massively indicative of how well regarded they are.
Two people who are completely invaluable in our community.
Step one, get it into Road, and then kind of take it from there, see who else will sell it for you.
There's lots of shops you can go, you can buy clothes or books or whatever, but there's only certain ones that you go into that you feel comfortable and it's a real pleasure to be there, and that was one of them for me.
It was the place where they got that record that changed their life or ruined their life.
So I'm gonna hop right out of your life. I'm opting out of your.
It all began about 15 years ago. It was a shop down in Temple Bar called Borderline. I know the guy who owns the shop, and I originally had trained many years ago as a cabinet maker. And he asked me if I could give him a help out, maybe build some units and just kind of look after some of the wall displays and do some stuff like that. When it came towards the end of the project, he put up this big sign in the window saying that he was looking for some part-time staff. So I took the sign out of the window and I just said, I'll take the job. A couple of weeks down the line, I'm standing in a record shop trying to figure out, how did I actually manage to do this?
I had just come back from London. A friend of mine owned a small clothes shop in Temple Bar, and I started working for her part-time. And a friend of hers owned Borderline, and he asked me could I work a few days for him.
We kind of got on really well, became really good friends more than anything else, just on a work basis. And just kind of, one thing led to another.
There was a gentleman, I think from the ESB, out fixing an electrical light outside Borderline at the time. So I asked the guy, would he lift me up in his cherry picker so I could knock on the window and wave in at Dave? Which I did, and I nearly gave Dave a heart attack.
And I kind of remember going out that night after work, and we went out for a few drinks, and that was the first time that the two of us kind of thought, are we kind of dating each other now? And we were like, yeah, I think we are actually.
While we were working there, we thought, you know what, we like doing this, maybe we could do it ourselves, maybe we could do things a little bit differently, and that's where the seed for opening our own shop came from.
Julie was the person who really kind of, sat me down and said, there's no reason in just talking about this, we can actually do this. If she hadn't been around at the time, I wouldn't be sitting in front of this camera talking about a record shop. When we had actually decided that we were going to open the shop, myself and Julie had spent pretty much the guts of a year saving every penny that we made. So we used to just wander around town quite a lot, seeing what we could do in Dublin for free.
And we came across this premises, which at the time was a carpet wholesaler's.
We saw an estate agent was putting up a for let sign. And within, I'd say, about 10 minutes of actually discovering and walking down Fade Street, we had signed a lease to rent the premises here.
We had done everything ourselves. Dave had made all the units, we'd sanded the floors ourselves, we'd painted the place. It was kind of like playing at, opening a shop. When the doors opened on the first Saturday, we were just so nervous and so tired.
We were ready for about a week, and we thought, no, the best thing to do is open the shop on a Saturday because, it's the busiest day in town and people are just going to go mad for this kind of thing. And it was the greatest anticlimax of all time. Our first customers were these two English guys.
And they wandered in as cool as anything, because as far as they knew, we could have been open 15 years.
And they were actually looking for directions to their hotel. But when they came into the shop, we were just so excited with the fact that people had come in that we were all kind of like, yay, brilliant, there's somebody here.
We were fighting each other to serve them. It was just so exciting.
By the end of the day, I remember we left this place and we went across the road to the Long Hall for a few drinks. And straight away, the two of us were thinking, have we done the right thing? Is this a really bad idea? The two of us pretty much worked full-time all day, every day, 6 days a week. Thankfully they were before the days when people felt obliged to open on Sunday, so we did get one day off.
The whole notion of indie rock as a, you know, as a guy it's a kind of a secret club to begin with. It's all about your knowledge of this or that or the other. So my first impression was I was slightly embarrassed and at the same time feeling like I discovered something really exciting.
Straight from the get-go, Road felt like a record shop where you could go in and you could actually talk to the staff, and that they wouldn't like look at you like you're an idiot because you didn't know about Jesus Lizard 7 Inches or something.
I would have went in the pretty early days, and the fact that it had a very different policy to what had previously been the policy of independent record shops in Dublin, it just wasn't like anywhere else. So I think a shop like Road, for loads of reasons, back in the sort of 97, 98 when it opened, was immediately set itself apart from what other shops were doing.
I didn't know Dave at the time, but he had come from a kind of a heritage of unbelievably cantankerous record shop workers. So we weren't sure whether or not Road was just going to be another make you stand there and play your vinyl to prove it scratched record shops.
I've worked in record shops, and there is a temptation sometimes to just go, oh, you idiot, you haven't heard of this, where have you been, you know? But that was the first one that I remember going into where, like Dave and Julie, they're really, yeah, come in, yeah, cool, whatever, and you just ask them questions.
For a lot of girls who liked music, it could be quite intimidating to go into a record shop, not just because you felt out of place, but because you were often, you know, greeted with derisory laughter about what you were buying maybe, or the fact that you were even in there. So when a shop like Road came along, the fact that there was a woman working behind the counter and a woman who was as knowledgeable and as interested in music as, you know, a whole generation of Irish girls who liked music was a huge bonus.
I do remember when I myself was a record buyer in my teens and going into shops and feeling, you know, quite small and quite nervous about approaching any of the salespeople. When I worked in Borderline, maybe 1 in every 20 people who came in were female. Road Records, I think, has a higher number of females than that, I'm pleased to say.
I have good memories of when Niall from the Rednecks' first baby, Matthew, was born, and every Saturday they used to go into Road, and the place would be like a creche, all queuing up and loads of babies and stuff, and Dave was great at having a laugh with them, so that, like, you don't get that, you know, you wouldn't get that in HMV.
Our initial idea for the shop basically was pretty much twofold. Big thing with both of us was that we were both really, really passionate about vinyl. And then the second thing that we were both really, really passionate about, probably more so me because I was in bands, was the amount of really, really good music that was being made around the city and around the country as well at the time.
They're really there because of the music, they're really there for how they feel about music and how they feel about the whole cultural dimension of records and what they are and what they mean to people, you know, particularly vinyl records and stuff like that. That it's more than just a commodity.
A lot of the stuff up on the walls is the kind of stuff that's in vinyl that I might have heard about or even have on CD. And I thought, God, it just looks so much better on vinyl. I mean, it's just, that's the way it should be. That's what that album should look like.
We had seen a lot of bands recording stuff and then not been able to find any kind of platform for this stuff to be sold.
The chances of going into any one of these stores and seeing a section saying independent Irish releases is just absolutely unheard of. So just that in itself, a scene was being nurtured and was allowed to grow.
I think Dave had said himself that having been in a band for a few years with almost nowhere to go to sell a CD, he said that was one of the inspirations behind opening the shop. And there was a comparative glut of new releases from Irish bands coinciding around the time Road opened up, and that wasn't a coincidence. There was a reason for that.
I was one of those classic kids, you know, with tennis racket, hurley, anything that was kind of guitar shapes in front of a mirror, just dreaming of, you know, I'm a member of Echo and the Bunnymen, or I'm in Joy Division or something like that. I was a little bit old before I actually decided I'm going to see if I can do this for myself now. Crossbreed was the first band we ever started, yeah, and actually they went on for quite a while, you know. I didn't really see much out of it at the end. By the time we decided we were going to break up, the last thing we ever did was we went in and recorded 3 songs. So in years to come, we can give it to people and go, you know, it's not just me telling you how amazing we were, that, you know, you can listen to this tape and realise that I'm actually lying, we weren't that amazing, really.
This was Dave's when he played in Crossbreed, and the upper frets are completely ruined because apparently Dave used to hammer it against his mic stand. I've never seen Dave play a gig. The idea that Dave was rocking out with that guitar is kind of funny.
Hello, we're Dash Madman and we love you.
Anytime I'd go to see bands, I was always telling them, look, you know, if you've got something out, bring it into the shop. Well, after a couple of months then, we really did begin to notice that, you know, it really was kicking off big style. You know, we were getting maybe 2 or 3 bands nearly every day.
You could have your hand-painted, limited, pressed 7-inch, and where else were you going to sell that but Road, were, you know, they supported that as if it was something that had come in from a major label.
People, you know, who had just started bands and, you know, hadn't even thought of recording at this point were kind of going, God, you know, we could do that.
It was critically important to a lot of people, and I think as well to give someone the belief that they have an EP, they have a single, they have an album, that you can actually release this and people are going to buy it. Because you know, I've spoken to bands and they go, oh yeah, we dropped our CD into Rhodes and people bought it.
Late 90s would have been the first wave of a lot of the bands that became a bit more established in the Irish independent community in the kind of the mid-noughties.
Because they were so friendly, I think bands were kind of maybe reticent to go to other places where they might think to be thrown out for having like a tape or a thing. But Road always felt like you could go in there with anything, and they would actually like you know, within reason, take it off you and sell it. And you know, if you felt good, you felt like you're a real band or something, you know.
One day I went into town, 1 cassette and 1 CD, and they were both on my first album. And I went to one shop, and the guy said, right, I don't know if I can help you, but leave that tape with me for a week and come back next week and I'll tell you what I think. And I did. And at the same time, I went to Road, said, you know, I just was wondering if you'd have a listen and I'll talk to you again. And I went out. And then a few days later, he said, yeah, great, just, you know, bring 10 in or whatever, a bunch in. And I was really excited, and I was thinking, this is the start. But the thing is, I thought it was going to be like that in every shop I went into. And the other shop where I brought the cassette, he said, I can't understand why you think anyone would be interested in this music. And I just backed out the door. And I was saying, can I have my tape back? And he gave me my tape. And so I won't say who it was.
The shop did become a bit of a mecca of people coming in, people trying to touch base, finding each other, listening to each other's music and maybe contacting each other later on.
The two of us kind of started to realise that, you know, kind of turned into this kind of kooky kind of hangout centre for people.
Every time I'd go in, there'd be all these guys sitting up at the counter drinking tea and chatting, or, you know, discussing the making of their new record, or what, you know, what the band was up to, or just talking about, you know, going for a drink last night and having a chat. And it seemed to happen very organically that these people became the centre of a whole movement of bands and people in Dublin.
A lot of really good international record shops, in order to kind of develop their own identity, it's always a good idea to get an in-house label going with a sense of, you know, the shop's identity and make them kind of, you know, collector's items.
We're here one day and we were actually having a conversation about the Sub Pop Singles Club. We were kind of looking at each other going, yeah, wouldn't it be cool to have a record label that releases only 7-inch singles, only unsigned bands, and a different band, one on each side. So there was never just one band on any single. A couple of weeks later, we all kind of met up again and we thought, you know, let's do it. Let's find out how much it's going to cost to do this kind of thing. And we realised that, you know, to actually make 500 7-inches wasn't going to cost us a huge amount of money.
Kind of gives you a snapshot of a city at a particular time. As well, you know, it became a kind of a collectible thing. So you kind of, if you're going to get any of them, you kind of have to get them all, you know.
That was really the beginning of a whole different chapter for me musically, and for a direction that I moved in, because it's the only thing I've ever released as Glenn Hansard. I've never released any other record under that name, and they gave me single #1, which was great. So I have that at home, you know, because everyone was numbered. I love the fact that they numbered every one.
Back when we were involved in it, it was a real way of getting the name of the band out there. We were number 5. We were in pretty illustrious company. The one before us was Kitzer, and the one after us was Glenn Hansard and Songs Ohio. We hadn't, I'm not sure if we'd even released our first 7-inch at that stage. It was a big deal for us to get on that.
Anytime there's a new split 7-inch would come out and be like, oh, right, great, so that wasn't the last one the last time. It's always on a knife edge, you know?
Our idea at the time was to release a 7-inch every 2 months. That happened twice. It didn't get too big for us, it just got too hard to control. Sadly, we all sat around and thought, look, there's no point in us doing this half-heartedly, so we decided after the 13 that, you know, that was going to be the end of it.
Only serious music buyers really bought vinyl for all throughout the 90s and most of the early 2000s. So that removed a huge part of his customer base.
The difference between running a viable business and going bust just seemed to be like a little hairline fracture.
There's no point in going on about how great something like Road Records is if you don't actually go and buy your music there.
Nothing lasts forever. Nothing that anybody's doing lasts forever. This building won't be here at some stage, you know, there'll be something else. And Dave is not the kind of master of his own destiny. No less than any of the rest of us aren't either, you know, it's just the way it is.
As a lot of the bands that would have been there from the beginning of Road were growing up, they had kids, they'd moved out of town, they'd less disposable income. You know, there was a lot of reasons why people become distracted, and people were just naturally distracted.
If you go into smaller record shops now, I think I read a description somewhere that they're like angling shops, you know, loads of kind of people in their 30s and 40s with no sign of a young person in sight anywhere near the place.
The writing was on the wall for, you know, a good 4 or 5 months. I was the one who kind of refused to actually believe it and see it. There's a bit of an old-fashioned kind of hippie in me whereby I kind of think, you know, it's bad, but, you know, it won't be bad forever. When I come in here tomorrow, it's going to be really busy. And then, you know, we can maybe think about changing things around, we can make this work, but that never happens. It was an incredibly stressful time as well. 6 months of, you know, waking up every morning just thinking, you know, what are we going to do? You know, this is really bad. Things are looking bad.
Falling asleep on the lawn.
And it was around the time of our son arriving that I really began to be serious about, yeah, okay. Because I'm kind of thinking there's only one person who's going to suffer here, and that's probably him.
We'd always regarded the shop as our baby, but when the real baby came along, you realise, well, it is only business. Much as it breaks your heart to think that all those years you spent building up a business, that it can just be swept away, you've got to be realistic.
About a week or two later, we made our decision. On Christmas Eve, we closed the shop, and we both said, well, that's it. I would still say it was one of the most difficult decisions that I've ever made. I closed the shop and I thought, when I lock this place, there's chances are we may never open it again. I put it up very quickly, and I just put it up as a piece to a few people who I had known and had been supportive of the shop, just to say, look, I know you're all worried and people have been talking about it, so here's what's happening.
It was a piece written from Dave's heart, and I think that's why it was so well received, because he really meant it.
It was very just matter of fact, and it was just, this is what's happening. And I think if you're like that with people, people respond very well.
I think a lot of people felt terrible that things could have gone that bad without anyone realising, you know.
I think the city as well got quite lax. A lot of people took Road for granted. Even people who were in bands started to take it for granted. And it was only, I think it was only when Dave released that farewell statement that people kind of realised that they had been neglecting the bread and butter of the kind of local music scene, i.e. the record shops.
When I heard, I wasn't surprised. I just remember thinking, gosh, I wonder what they'll do, or you know, and my first response was, what a great loss it is.
When I read the statement, I just kind of thought it had been such a huge part of my life that I wanted people to know, because not everybody is on the internet and not everybody reads Thumped.
She asked me to interview me about the shop, and you know, I said to her no. I said I don't want to do another interview because I had done quite a few. And they were very negative. I was in a very negative frame of mind, and you know, people wanted me to talk about what we had done for Irish music, but to me, I had just lost the business, my livelihood. So she said, well look, do you mind if I write a piece about the shop? And I said, look, that's fine, you know, I'd appreciate it.
I was in a supermarket and Dave sent me a text saying that it had captured the shop in a way that a lot of people didn't necessarily get. From that piece, I think people started to whisper and talk and wonder, what can we do?
You know, immediately you find yourself going, how can you come to the aid of this very important institution in our city that we need to save?
Dave was very, very adamant that what's done was done and there was no going back, and the situation was irreparable. But when he saw the outpouring of support, I think that really gave him some hope that he just hadn't had for a couple of years.
People were sending us cards. Some of them had like, you know, 2 or 3 page letters written, you know, about the very first time I bought something here.
We had people's mums dropping in because they weren't in the country. We had letters from people all over Europe who maybe used to live in Dublin and didn't anymore, but they'd heard about the shop. It was great. It was quite emotional, to be honest.
It meant a lot to us, just personally, more so than anything else, that, you know, that we had an influence on people and people actually appreciated what we did and actually just liked us as people. Kind of was quite heartwarming.
In the same way that they helped out like people in bands back in the day, you know, it's like you remember shit like that, you know.
I knew that it didn't have to close, that this was simply a chain of events that hadn't reached its natural conclusion and there was a way to stop it. And so I just was like, well, I could put on a gig and that might help, and it's one of the few things I could have done in the situation, so it was the thing I did.
The idea of the benefit concert, the person who came up with that was a guy called Vinny from the Jimmy Cake, who was one of the head buyers in Tower Records around the corner. I still look back and think, not just the irony of it, but the fact that it meant so much to people that someone from another shop that, you know, us closing down would benefit them. But people didn't see it in that way. They saw it as losing something that they really wanted. It's one of the strangest gigs I've ever been at in my life. I was in the premises for, I would say, about 3 hours before I got furthered on the bar. Julie turned around to me about an hour into the benefit gig and she says, I feel like I'm at my own wedding.
I just remember Dave walking around stunned. Just kind of walking, because everybody wanted to talk to him, so he just looked like he'd been hit over the head with a baseball bat.
There'd been a fire in there, and that night would have wiped out the whole Irish music community. Every band in Dublin was in there.
It was like a wedding for indie nerds.
Andrews Lane was pretty much full, I think, for at like 8 o'clock. It was brilliant. So we played first and we got our set out of the way and then went and got salted.
I think I did a cover of, you know, Ireland's in the Stream, but I changed it to Ireland's Indie Scene. Ireland's in the scene, that is what we are. Kitzer actually was the one who came up with that, and I nicked it.
It was very, very emotional because it really brought home to both myself and Dave what the shop meant and how much people were willing to kind of make an effort to try and put us back on our feet. At the end of the day, we were still unsure as to whether to take people up on the investment offer.
The idea behind that was that we get a certain amount of people that were involved in kind of, you know, journalism, people that were musicians, people that maybe were in PR. They will all invest the same amount of money. It was a small amount of money each, but it turned into to us, a substantial amount of money. It didn't just pay off the debts, it gave us money to play around with to fill the shop up again.
You were going to put your money in and say goodbye to it. All of the people knew that and were more than happy to do it.
It was a very strange time. We spent a month trying to get rid of everything from the shop and then started to realise that it's not going to work financially because we've nothing to sell anymore.
Within a matter of months of going from, you know, we're closing down the business and losing the business that we've effectively worked for 13 years to a very, very buoyant, very positive feeling. It was just surreal. I just didn't think things could turn around that quickly.
We had done Record Store Day the previous year. It was only actually ourselves in Tower that had done it that year, and it wasn't as big as it was this year. When we noticed how big it was, kind of the whole thing, that the press were just going mad about it this year, that was when we decided, you know, let's really make an effort to have, you know, pretty much non-stop music in the shop all day. And people in the press could also say, you know, it's official, Road Records are staying open.
The shop was buzzing, you know, and it's a lovely thing to see just the shop turned into a little venue.
Let's face it, I mean, there wasn't a lot of room in the place, you know, but that was kind of the charm of the thing. It enhanced that slightly kind of village feel.
You know, people like Neil Hannon came out, and you know, Neil Hannon doesn't have to come out, he just did, and he did a couple of songs on top of the counter in Road, and he was just a gentleman, and it was really appreciated. It was a great day. It was a really good day, and it was really affirming that there might be a future for music retail.
There was people talking about it for weeks afterwards, but they were talking about actual record stores. It wasn't just this entity that was, you know, invented online. And people were actually talking about, you know, record shops. About, you know, they're actually kind of cool, and they are. It seemed like we were doing kind of quite well. We were actually selling more CDs than we had done in the kind of 10 or 12 years beforehand. But by the end of the year, we realised that we were making less money, and even though we were actually selling more. And we were getting more people in the door, all right. It was kind of something that we needed it to be a lot more than that.
I think the difference this time around was, this time we left no stone unturned. There wasn't anything we didn't try or change, so with our hand on our hearts this time we could say, well, we did our absolute best and there was nothing more we can do.
We knew that this time around, as opposed to the last time, that there really wasn't a way out. We tried everything, we'd done everything we possibly could. And we just said, well, this is it, it's closing. And, you know, there is no turning back from this anymore. It was more of a sadness this time around. The last time I think I was a little bit bitter about just retail and the music industry. This time around, you know, I don't think I have any of that anymore now. It's just the way things are. There's nothing we can do about it. We opened the shop on the day, it actually passed really quickly, and it was, I have to say, it was actually quite pleasant. The previous 2 weeks coming up to it were, I found particularly very hard. There was a lot of people coming in, kind of, you know, and they knew this time it was for real. When it came to the very last day, I think I realised that a lot of people had been doing this because they didn't want to come in on the last day. So mostly what we had around were like very, very close friends rather than, you know, people we would have known as customers. I was genuinely dreading the whole, you know, just basically closing the shutters for the last time. I knew I was going to be in there again afterwards, but it wasn't going to be anything similar. I remember leaving the shop and just kind of turning away going, that actually wasn't as it didn't seem as sad as I was expecting. I had been dreading it, you know, not going into work every day. For the first week or two it was kind of strange. I've certainly gotten used to it now, and it's very pleasant being at home all the time.
We're so happy to play at their, well, not happy, mixed emotions to play at Rhodes farewell party. And we just want to say, well, from the bottom of our hearts and from the bottom of all the other band's hearts, I'm sure, thanks very much to Dave and Judy for an amazing shop.
With the 2 months or whatever between the closure and the benefit gig, there was a lot of perspective, and we were able to realise that, yeah, we had done the right thing, and now it's time to look back and think of all the great times we had, all the great songs we'd heard, and all the amazing people we'd met.
You know, it genuinely felt like just one massive big kind of party, and just most people that were there were there just to say thanks. don't think either of us are particularly good or fond of DJing. Neither of us would do it very often apart from at home or in the shop, so it was kind of nice because we didn't really feel that there was any pressure on us to make sure that the songs were mixing into each other and that kind of thing. Most of the stuff we were playing was probably undanceable, but it was nice just to see people at the bar, and just every now and again when we were upstairs you could kind of look down, and as soon as you put a record on, people were going, oh my god, I haven't heard that in years.
As Dave said, it was just fun watching people's faces. Either the blank look of people who are way younger than me, who are going, who the hell is that? Or the recognition. It was great fun.
Both of us feel very proud about what we did. I think we both had a great time. We had our off days. There was days when the work was too hard and that kind of thing, but you know, looking back, I can't think of kind of a better way to have spent 13 or 14 years, you know. It was an absolute dream job, and you know, there's nothing we would have done differently, you know.